Pests beware, your fields have heroes. The Pests and Predators podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes and is powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Learn how beneficial insects fight pests and protect your crops. Visit fieldheroes.ca today.
I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com, and hope you had yourself a great week. Yeah, the weather finally better. Yes, but I'll tell you, for a good part of the Western Canadian prairies, we could really use some rain. Needed now. And on Mother's Day weekend, and a happy Mother's Day weekend to everybody out there. Hopefully, a good chance. This is a good family weekend. Opportunity to get together, and a lot of people going out for brunch and suppers and lunches and getting together in living rooms and things like that. And moms are really kind of what make the world go round, and really in many cases, many farm families, very much the glue that holds the family together. I think that is very true for a lot of families. So happy Mother's Day to everybody out there. But the one mother that people probably are not thinking great things about is Mother Nature. She is not cooperating. And although it's, if you're in Calgary and going down the Bow River and maybe doing some fishing, or you're in Saskatoon and going down the river, and, the weather's been nice enough to do that kind of stuff. When we hit 30 degrees, it's, people get out and about and do things. You're like, man, God, it's just so nice. No rain, nothing. Just beautiful. Well, sorry to tell you, everybody living in the city, but all the farmers that are listening to this right now, farmers and ranchers, they're saying we need some moisture. And it's very true. Now, there are pockets where conditions are pretty good, but I will tell you that it is not the case all over. We need some moisture in really a lot of parts of the Western Canadian prairies. It's getting dry fast. What in some areas look like to be off to a decent start, not so much as it was 2 weeks ago. Hey, today on the show, we're going to talk about my trip to Washington, D.C., and obviously Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, was there as well. We got the newest results of our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. We'll talk about that. We've also got Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange, here to talk about the beef markets. And I've got some audio for you with Devin Mogler, who is the CEO of NOPA, which is the organization that represents all of the crushers for soybeans and flax and canola in the United States. And there's some Canadian impacts on that interview for sure. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can always call that RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Okay, like I said, I was in Washington, D.C., and the Prime Minister was as well. To be honest, I thought the Prime Minister did very well. I thought that the meeting at the White House, there's a lot of ways that could have gone. I think he did very well. In some ways, it was kind of a non-event, which I think is success. That is a good thing, okay? I think he didn't talk a lot, but he got to the words that he needed to get in. I thought that was quite good. So I definitely think that that was a positive. I was in D.C. on the Tuesday as well. I was over at the USDA building. I was with EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. Also got some audio with a discussion with USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins, as well as a number of other members or I guess employees at USDA. I was there with the National Association of Farm Broadcasters. Really did appreciate that. It was a good trip. D.C. is beautiful. If you have not been to Washington, D.C., highly encourage you to do so. The mall area, just absolutely gorgeous. Just absolutely gorgeous. So beautiful stuff. It is where the action is. That is for sure. There's a lot of stuff happening. U.S.-UK trade deal as well. Big time look at, I guess, a lot of time. When we say trade deal, I would say more of an agreement, work in progress. They said it's a living document. There's still some work to be done on that thing. That's pretty evident. There was mention of ethanol. I think it was like $600 or $700 million worth of U.S. ethanol is going to go to the UK. Beef was mentioned. Now, that's non-hormone beef. that is not conventional beef. So 13,000 metric tons, I believe, was the amount that was in that agreement. I guess how I would look at this is very much, I guess it proves that there can be, with all of the chaos and the angst that President Trump has created in the trade arena, I guess there is an opportunity to have some smoother relations. So also, they didn't tackle a lot of the non-tariff trade barriers that it applies to hormone beef or some of the carcass washing. So that's one where I was really hoping the U.S. was going to crack open that UK market for conventional beef that where someone used an implant. I think that that would be a big advantage for Canada if they did that. It's similar to when they did that Phase 1 deal. You remember in the first Trump administration, the White House negotiated that Phase 1 deal. It also, they got China to move on the use of ractopamine. And that was good for Canada, too. So we sort of rode the U.S. coattails on that one. A good thing indeed. But back to the Prime Minister. I think that he did very well this week. And it seems that there is a bit of a good relationship between Mark Carney and Donald Trump. And that's going to really upset. That's really going to upset some Canadians that voted for Carney on the basis that the relationship with the U.S. was over. Well, if you thought the relationship between Canada and the U.S. was over, sorry, you fell for that one, suckers. Sorry. It is one of the most successful trading relationships between two countries, though no doubt it has some issues. But the other part of that, too, is that I did not think it was over, and clearly Carney walked in, he was prepared, and it was good. So calm waters, not necessarily a bad thing at all. We got the U.S. and China talking trade over here over the weekend, and we're going to have the announcement as well this coming week, I think, of the cabinet is what is expected, and all eyes will be on who's going to be the ag minister. And I think a lot of people are really betting and assuming it's going to be Cody Blois, who is an MP out of King Hants, Nova Scotia, highly respected by the industry. He was the ag minister in the first Carney cabinet there for a week before the election was called. He knows the file. He's passionate about the file, and I think he, with his background, he'll be a very good complement to USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins. I've been around Secretary Rollins on 3 different occasions now, or 4 occasions in the same room, and I think that Cody Blois would do well. That's an opportunity for a good relationship. So I think that's where a lot of the in using gambling terms, the smart money is betting. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. And of course, from a Alberta and Saskatchewan perspective as well, I think a lot of people are looking at who's going to be the energy minister and what that looks like. Carney's made a lot of big promises when it comes to who is going, about energy development and, this idea of nation building and national unity. And I think there's a lot of people in Western Canada pushing for, we need to see some development. Commitment to natural resources, as much as agriculture talks about how we want a commitment to agriculture, I think the energy industry is very much looking for a commitment to it as well. We will have to wait and see. What we're going to do is we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the new results of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. How are farmers viewing the year ahead? We'll get to that when we come back. You're listening to Real Ag on the Weekend. If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters, and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
One of the things that we do at Real Agriculture is we do a Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, and the market research arm of Real Agriculture is Real Agri Studies. And my partner and I, Justin Funk, we ask a number of different questions of farmers and ranchers across the country. Now, some of this has to do with the financial aspects of their business. Some of it has to do with their overall attitude or perception of the ag economy, the Canadian economy, as well as which direction they think the markets are going. And we even ask some questions about mental health. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through some of those results. I'm going to kind of summarize it for you and provide some thoughts as to what exactly is going on here. You can find out more about Real Agri Studies by going to RealAgristudies.com. You know, if you're a farmer or rancher out there, we're always looking for more people to be a part of our Insights panel, and you can do that at RealAgristudies.com. Okay, so first off, we asked farmers about their current farm financial performance. Now, this is, how does my farm financial performance look today versus 12 months ago? The scale is 0 to 200. 100 is neutral. So below 100, negative. Above 100, positive. And for the last number of quarters, current farm financial performance has been negative. So in the month of April, Canadian farmers and ranchers said, we're actually at 64. So a 64 out of 200. Quite negative. Now, going back to October, where we were kind of at this level, and this past January, we had bumped up to 83, and now we've snapped back to 64. This kind of describes how farmers are, and a lot of crop farmers, I might add, are feeling about the current situation. There's some concerns out there from a margin perspective. And if you're listening in the city and you've got relatives that are farming, you get together on Mother's Day, you're probably going to hear about some of this kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to the cattle markets and the beef business, farmers feeling a lot more positive. Now, we also ask about future farm financial performance. So this is, okay, based as I look out 12 months from now, how does my future farm financial performance compare to today? Farmers also feeling somewhat negative, 74. Now, we have progressively in the last year continued to move lower. So April of 2024, we were at 87. And we have slipped lower and lower each quarter. Now we're down to 74. Okay, so also showing some negative sentiment towards their future farm financial performance. Here's where she gets really ugly. Optimism towards the Canadian ag economy. In the next 12 months, will the Canadian ag economy have widespread good times or widespread bad times? 40, which is higher than January, but still quite low. When we ask farmers about, in the next 5 years, will we have widespread good times or widespread bad times? And this was taken before the election, okay? The week before the election. 64 out of 200, down from 72 and 78 in months prior. So you can see here that we've got kind of an overall sour tone right now to profitability and financial health at the farm gate level. There's a lot of variables out there. Well, let's not ignore that. We got a lot of variables out there. Variables like, tariffs, the questions about, trading relationships going forward. We've also had a lot of concern from farmers when it comes to, overall input costs. The market's been kind of in a bit of a struggle, but inputs have not necessarily responded to some of those lower market prices, okay? When we ask farmers out there about, confidence in marketing crops, what we see is that, and this has been pretty well flat, but we're a 77 out of 200. Now, this is no surprise, and I wouldn't take too much out of this. This is reflective of the volatility that's out there. And so how confident am I, whether the market goes up or the market goes down, how confident am I in my marketing plan? There's some lack of confidence. There's plan. This doesn't mean there's not a plan, but it's like, I don't know if I got the right one. It's the lacking conviction in our plan. Okay? Now, when we ask farmers about, hey, the outlook on selling crops, is this a good time to hold my inventory or is it a good time to sell? Am I bullish or am I bearish? And for the third survey in a row, we're above 100. So we're at a 109. Okay, so we're just slightly above neutral. I think this is encouraging. And maybe some people would say, well, to be in this business, you got to be optimistic. So even given all of some of the financial situation and the concern there, farmers are feeling like there's an opportunity for this market to go higher. And I interview market analysts on a weekly basis. And I can tell you that there are some fundamental pieces that there is opportunity for the market to be higher. Now, somebody may be saying, well, wait a minute. So farmers think the market's going to be higher, but they're still feeling really negative about their financial performance? I don't understand. That's where the costs come in. We have not seen the consolidation of costs, input prices, fuel, so like fertilizer, fuel, labor. The costs they've held strong. They've been very sticky, as one might describe it. So that's where the negativity comes from. Now, when we ask farmers about their state of mental health, how is my mental health today versus a year ago? We do see a little bit of a decline at 85 out of 200, which is down a little bit from last month and down a little bit from back in October. So that's the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. And what we do now is we start to get into the nitty-gritty, some of the real details and describe, okay, how do farmers between, that are under the age of 35 compare to farmers that are over the age of 65, or large farms versus small farms. And we'll break that down here over the coming weeks. And it is very interesting to see some of those differences geographically as well. How do farmers feel in Western Canada versus Eastern Canada? We also, because we ask some of the same questions in the exact same way as the CME Purdue Ag Barometer, we're also able to compare U.S. sentiment at the farm level versus Canada, which I find very fascinating as well. Now, if you have any questions about the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, maybe, like I said, you want to participate, go to realagristudies.com. You can provide me your questions and feedback at shaney@realagriculture.com. And this is cool stuff because it really allows us to understand what exactly is the farmer going through. What's on their mind? What are their attitudes? And how is that driving some of the decision making and the behavior and just the general outlook on the industry? Fascinating stuff. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back here on RealAg on the weekend, we're going to continue the show, and we're going to be joined by Anne Wasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange. We're talking beef markets right after this.
Farmers, trust is everything. Genesis Fertilizers is making real progress towards providing reliable, locally produced fertilizer. Join the ownership group and protect your bottom line. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada. Every 2 weeks, I get a chance to talk to Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange, to get an idea on what's going on in these cattle markets. Steamy. You've probably seen it if you go to the grocery store, and you definitely know about it if you are in the beef business. Things are a little bit better than they have been historically over the past number of years. Record prices, and we got Anne's thoughts on it. Here's Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Anne.
Wow.
Steamy, hot. Like, we're getting into some warmer temperatures. And it's not just the barometer that's gone up. It is also the cattle markets. What is at work here?
Wow. We certainly are in some more new price high territory this week on both sides of the border. So that's exciting news. I look at the calendar, of course, and I wonder, are we getting close to that top? But let's talk about what happened this week. So in the South, Texas, Kansas, we were $3 higher again. So 218 to 221 live. In the North, the Nebraska live markets were 225 to 228. So that's going to be called anywhere from $3 to $5 higher than last week. Dressed, 352 to 360 delivered. Those are US dollars, yes.
Wow.
And that's $4 to $8 higher than last week. So just an amazing run as we continue to chop at new levels. Timing on the calendar is about right, as I mentioned, but certainly these levels are higher than I think many of us thought. Although some of these target areas that we're at now are kind of, if you were looking at the technicals, we're getting really close to those targets for highs.
Now, like the prices in the last week, they're not impacting prices on Canadian long weekend in May or Memorial Day. That beef was bought quite a while ago, correct?
Correct. Demand has been solid. So again, that choice cutout that we keep watching, the kills have been off. You know, we've seen packers with their losses dropping their kills. And so some support to the cutout was expected. It was a little slow in coming, but this week we saw the choice cutout close almost $5 higher than last week. So 347.90. Again, this is that time period from a demand perspective as we head into that grilling season. So all of this is part and parcel. Demand is strong. Prices are up, supporting certainly these higher cash cattle prices. So the other big jump was on the Select product. We talk a lot about the Choice product. Select jumped $9. So Choice was up $5 and the Select was up $9 this week. So it's strong on all cuts.
Yeah, on those the Choice Select spread, I had a listener email out, somebody from outside the beef business who had said, why don't you report the Canadian numbers? And the reason is that we don't have them. So that's the simplest way to
good call. Now, I'll just, before we leave prices, let me just finish on the local market, because we keep making new levels as far as new highs here in Alberta. So the fat cattle market on a dress basis here this week was up $3. Dressed $4.90 to $4.93 delivered. Feedlots are really basically into their calf fed, so those lighter type carcass weights, and that's showing up in the data. Last week's steer weight nationally and here in Canada was 905 pounds. That's 11 pounds below this same week last year and 16 pounds below that 5-year average. So we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but the numbers keep coming down. That's certainly helping to shore up that drop in production. Fed cattle production in Canada is actually down 10% from a tonnage perspective this year. Last year when we talked about it, the kill wasn't much different, but carcass weights were up 25, 30 pounds, right? So that all those pieces all come together to talk about tonnage. So just wanted to make those points.
Yeah. Stats Can put out some data regarding live cattle exports. What did that show us?
Okay, so Shaun, this is March data. I want to be really clear because here we are into May and sometimes that delay kind of catches us. We knew March was super busy. If you recall, that was right ahead of that April 2nd tariff announcement, unknown announcement date. So March was busy. This is the data from StatsCan that confirms what we all saw happening at the border crossings in Western Canada. So fed cattle exports in March, so fat cattle going straight to packing plants in the U.S. were up 21%. For that whole first quarter of this year, we're up 32%. So about 158,000 head of fat cattle went south in that first quarter. On the feeder cattle side, and we knew this was busy, we don't normally, and not in recent years, we haven't sent many feeder cattle south, but we were 3 times what we sent in March of last year. So 300%. So Q1, when you do Jan, Feb, March, 163% increase. That's about 58,000 feeders went south in that first quarter. So a busy one. Cow exports were also up 10% in March. So you saying what went south? My answer is basically everything.
Everything did. Now, the ramifications of those numbers later on in the year, does that mean the back end of the year we're going to have to pull a bunch of feeder cattle north? Like what will we be watching there, or does it just
we will be watching the feeder cattle imports closely. We know in the last few years that's been the only way Western Canadian feedlots have been able to fill pens.
Yeah.
So that will be a key. Do they fill the pens? They'll have to use imports to do it, I suspect. Or do we see some pens go empty? And speaking of pens, Canfax will release their May 1 report this afternoon. So that's the cattle on feed report for Alberta and Saskatchewan. When you say based on what we've done in the first quarter and April, I think it's my guesstimate for this afternoon's report is to see those on feed numbers continue to drop. April 1 was down 4%, just as a reminder. So we'll drop. And I also expect April placements to be down because after we've sent so many cattle south, things have just gotten really quiet.
So pen utilization down.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see that. I think we'll see that show up in the data. And the other kind of supporting factor to this discussion is what's going on, or maybe I should say what's not going on at Alberta auction markets. So now that we've kind of finished up the month of April data, we can talk about how many cattle didn't move through markets in the month of April, down 38% from last year. But it wasn't just 1 month. March was down 16%. We've been so busy on the export front that it was really quiet through the markets. So I know it was erratic through the first quarter, some weeks big, some weeks small, but when the dust all settles, our auction market volumes are way off the mark.
And just to circle back on this, so we saw those liners, like, you know, you stop at a Flying J or some other truck stop, there were cattle liners like crazy. You'd see them going on Highway 3 towards British Columbia, down to Coots as well. So we saw the liners on the highway. So these numbers confirm that. And this is all related to those, you know, the Trump tariffs, threats of tariffs, the uncertainty that all that had created.
Yeah. So the word we're using now, I guess, when we talk about this is front loading,
yep.
Right? So it was all in an unknown anticipation of what might happen. In hindsight, you know, it didn't materialize the way some thought, but nevertheless, producers made those actions ahead of time.
That was Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. And like I said, highly encourage you to follow along as I talk to Anne every 2 weeks, providing that analysis and insights into what is happening in the beef markets. And lately, it's just been up. It's been fairly easy. A lot happening. Very interesting stuff there on the exports as all that front loading happened. Okay, when we come back, we're going to hear from Devin Mogler. He's the CEO of NOPA, and he joins us right after this.
Pests beware, your fields have heroes. The Pests and Predators podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes and is powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Learn how beneficial insects fight pests and protect your crops. Visit fieldheroes.ca today.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
This week when I was in Washington, D.C., I had a chance to catch up with the CEO of NOPA. This is the organization that represents all of the crushers in the United States. And some of their members are also they're members of COA, which is the Canadian Oilseed Processors Association. So this is like Richardson's and Cargill and Viterra, all these crush plants that are crushing canola for things like canola oil or diesel. So here's my conversation with Devin Mogler, CEO of NOPA.
Right off the top, we're hearing some stuff out of, obviously, the administration, coming out of RFK Jr., Secretary, about some of the things regarding the future of oilseeds. Obviously, I think we know your position on this matter. What are some of the things you're doing on it?
So we're trying to do what we can to help educate members of the administration as well as members of the public on the fact that there's a tremendous body of research showing that oilseeds are not only healthy but also nutritious. They've been used in our diets for almost a century. I know there's a push to make America, quote unquote, healthy again, and we believe we've got a role to play there. Oilseeds are heart healthy, particularly when you talk about something like canola. So we think the facts and the science are on our side, and we think that some of this anti-seed oils rhetoric is something of a bit of a food fad right now that's kind of caught wind online. We're not, taking any chances though. We're engaging with the administration. We're explaining to them how these oils are not only nutritious and safe, but also plentiful and affordable. One of the big reasons that President Trump was elected was because of high grocery store prices, high restaurant prices, and doing something radical like eliminating or limiting seed oil use would have a dramatic impact on the cost that consumers pay, not only for prepared foods, but also in the grocery store aisle and at restaurants.
Yeah, and I think if you were honest with Americans and you said, okay, we're not going to use U.S.-produced soybean oil, instead we're going to import a bunch of beef tallow from Brazil, they would probably be against that.
You would think so. And, look, if someone wants to fry their French fries in beef tallow as opposed to soybean oil or canola oil, that's fine. This should be about consumer choice. And we've actually heard RFK Jr. echo that same sentiment. When asked what his problem is with seed oils, he typically just says they're included a lot in ultra-processed foods, and we don't like ultra-processed foods. So I don't know if it's a seed oils issue per se. Even when he was at a Steak and Shake doing a hit on how they are frying their fries in tallow, he's talked about how he just wants to, quote unquote, reward companies that make decisions to use alternatives, but he doesn't plan on banning anything. It's more about he just wants consumers to know what's in their food. And like I said, we believe we've got a strong track record of safety and nutrition evidence and science backing us up.
So if that's, I'm assuming maybe that would be, so let's just say that's the number one issue. What's number two? Is it trade?
Well, trade is right up there. There's a lot, it seems like everything's a priority these days.
No slow times at NOPA.
No, the biofuels policy is really what has driven the massive expansion in crushing in the U.S. Over $6 billion invested over the past 3 or 4 years to expand capacity by over 25%, and that's just on the soybean side, not counting all the soft seed crush expansions, driven very much by the RFS, the Renewable Fuel Standard, and we're working around the clock to try and get new volume obligations put out on that with the EPA. And we found some unusual bedfellows in this. We're working hand in glove with the American Petroleum Institute, which is big oil, along with everyone from the ethanol sector, the biodiesel and renewable diesel sector, us at NOPA and the American Soybean Association to ask for 5.25 billion gallons of biomass-based diesel in a 2026 renewable volume obligation. And it feels like we're pretty close to that. We've got a lot of alignment across the industry, and we can see those rules as soon as the end of this month.
Yeah, and when companies are thinking about investing hundreds of millions of dollars to expand crush capacity because of what's happening on the biofuels front, they want political certainty. And I think a lot of, I was talking to the RFA earlier, Jeff Cooper, and we were talking about how, the Trump administration is pro-biofuel, but that's at 100,000 feet. We need to get down to the 25,000 feet now.
Yep. I do think that it's been a bit of a sea change from the last Trump administration. I was out here working in the Senate and then on ethanol policy during Trump 1, and it was trench warfare between biofuels and big oil. Yeah. And since then, a lot of the major petroleum companies have invested not only in renewable diesel capacity, but also even in some crushing facilities. So they're a lot more integrated into this side of the supply chain. So we've got a lot more alignment when we're working on an issue like this. So us being able to go in as a group and all go to EPA and USDA and these other agencies, including the White House, and say, we're all aligned on our ask. It's refreshing to them because they remember some of the headaches they had to deal with this policy issue in the past. Not to say that we're entirely aligned on every issue, but it feels like we've certainly come a long way over the past 8 years.
Yeah, when I talk to the pork producers or NCBA, we talk about the integrated supply chain and just how, the Canadian and the U.S. market are very complementary to each other. What about the crushing market? You would have a lot of common members between NOPA and COPA. How did the two sides work together?
We collaborate very closely on policy, including on trade policy, including on some of the low carbon fuel standards that are out there. We're always comparing notes when California is looking at making changes, like they recently proposed to cap vegetable oil inclusion in biomass-based diesel at 20%, and requiring new sustainability and traceability guidelines. So we work with them on that. And when it comes to trade across the border, as you mentioned, it's very integrated, and we view that when we're talking about, supporting domestic feedstocks, what we really mean is North American or USMCA feedstocks. So when we're looking at a tax policy, we're okay with having canola oil from Canada coming in and qualifying for a fuel credit here in the U.S. We're more concerned about tallow from South America, or quote unquote used cooking oil coming in from Asia that's displacing our homegrown feedstocks.
Yeah, because there was, in the last administration, in the Biden presidency, there was some talk about, there being a push for domestic feedstock only. And it had a lot of Western Canadian canola producers and crushers, I'm sure, very, very concerned. So you're looking more of a North American market?
We think that there's a middle ground there where we could, create a North American or USMCA kind of ring fence where all those feedstocks could qualify and help keep out the real problem actors, which is the folks who are dumping used cooking oil and tallow on both of our countries.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of your members that also access and utilize the CFR in Canada.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. We export a tremendous amount of renewable diesel and ethanol. I'm not on that side of the business anymore, but it's an incredibly important market. And, I know on the ethanol side, they just exported 1.9 billion gallons, and I think over 600 million of that went to Canada. So very integrated supply chain, and we'd like to make sure that we can continue to see both meal and oil flow back and forth, as well as the fuels.
Yeah, I know you probably spend a big bulk of your time talking soybeans, but for a lot of farmers in the northern tier, North Dakota, obviously there's some canola acres as well, and trying to increase that acre. How does that factor into all these discussions?
Well, look, we want to see growth across the board. We represent not only soybean and canola, but safflower and flax, et cetera. So we want to see expansion of softseed as well as soybean crushing and canola. So we're supportive of all of it. We believe that getting the biofuels policy right is a rising tide that will lift all boats.
What do we do with all the meal?
That's a great question. I mean, my family feeds fair to finish hogs, and they certainly like the cheap meal prices, but it's putting pressure on margins. It's certainly helping our domestic livestock industry, but we need to find new markets. We need to expand some of those existing markets that we already have.
That was a portion of my conversation with Devin Mogler, CEO of NOPA. Okay, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to Real Ag on the Weekend.